Well, I continue to, I decided to continue with this video since I'm on sort of a roll here. But what I wanted to say is this. As far as the Ukrainian people are concerned, it is not in their best interest to join up with the EU exclusively to the point where the IMF is going to dictate the rules, where the European Central Bank is going to dictate the rules, because all that's going to result in is a decrease in the already miserable living standards in the country. And they have nothing to gain from judging or laying their eggs all in one basket, so to speak. Now, the people of Ukraine had very legitimate grievances when these protests in Kiev erupted. The grievances were against the massive corruption in government. But unfortunately, Western NGOs and very tricky entities took over these protests, manipulated them into an anti-Russian sentiment, which should not even be an issue in Ukraine. The Ukraine is as much Russian as it is Western, and it has always been so. It's not like this came out of the blue. But as has been portrayed through this entire episode, beginning with this leaked Victoria Nuland phone call, in which she basically said, and she is essentially an American neocon, saying during this conversation, well, fuck the EU. I mean, this tells you right there, America, they could care less about the European Union. What they want to establish is dominance over the over the European Union. That's all. It's not as if this is some concerted effort to help the European Union. The European Union, by the way, has its own troubles. It was basically, I could make another video about this, but the European Union leadership is equally corrupt, I might add. So it's a very, very complicated picture. But yes, the people of Ukraine had legitimate grievances about the corruption in their government. And that has been going on ever since its independence. But they're no less independent by joining exclusively the European Union. Their best bet actually would be to be truly independent and be able to have a balanced policy taking the powers of the EU and Russia into account. But the leadership, the present leadership, and the Ukrainians in the western part of it are about to find out how deeply they have been deceived and tricked by their new leadership, Poroshenko and Yatsenuk, or whatever his name is, basically all U.S. puppets. And of course, it's not an accident that the son of Biden, Joseph Biden, is now, the head of one of the bigger energy companies in that country. Not to mention some other people deeply connected to the U.S. foreign policy establishment in order to push through their own agenda in the greater American interest. It has nothing to do with Ukrainians. In order to further American interests and American profits in that country. So this is essentially the crux of the situation. I don't believe that I wouldn't consider Putin a dictator. He was elected by his own people. Some of his policies are controversial. If we think about our own government and government surveillance here in the United States, please don't tell me that there isn't massive surveillance going on, that there isn't massive corruption going on at the highest levels, banking scandals, big, huge corporate scandals, Western corporations evading taxes, lowering their taxes, essentially trying to dismantle national governments, infringing on the sovereignty of nations. It is a very complicated global picture that we're looking at. I am not against, or I should say I am against the neo-liberal economic policies which are being pushed forth. The market solves everything mantra. The market will not solve everything, especially not a market that exists today in which winners take all. Now, we Westerners like to complain about the massive corruption going on in Africa, in India, in lesser developed nations. But I tend to take a more nuanced perspective, because what I see happening is that the corruption within Western governments, Western corporations, the Western banking system, is just as grievous as anywhere else. In fact, it might even be more grievous in terms of scale. You know, when we're talking about bribes, when we're talking about corrupt governments, let's say in Africa, you know, where some of the autocrats there are amassing vast amounts of fortunes, which are then deposited into Swiss bank accounts, or, you know, other unaccountable locations. This cannot possibly happen without Western complicity. It's just that the amount of corruption within Western society itself is, to most Westerners, more hidden. But it operates on a vastly larger scale. And if this continues, if this winner takes all mentality continues, and if these corporate entities, unaccountable entities, by the way, which are amassing more and more wealth globally, if this continues, then in my view, the planet is essentially fucked. That's what I think. It's not that there is this huge conspiracy going on, because of course conspiracies exist, and you know, let's just drop the whole thing about conspiracy theories to start with. Of course, people conspire, entities conspire, powerful forces conspire. This has always happened throughout history. So let's just drop this let's just stop talking about the word conspiracy theory here. Certain entities, certain movements, certain arrangements between humans come together, and these arrangements are not always good for humanity. That's the bottom line. But what I see coming here is a very dystopian future, not only for humanity, which in the grander scheme of things in the universe really doesn't even count, you know, to the future of anything, animals, plants, whatever. So I think, I suppose we could talk about philosophy now, which probably doesn't get us anywhere either. But we need to curtail very malicious forces which are arising almost by accident. My timer is going off, and yeah, I am gonna eat my dinner now. So good night.